ブラスターズ
All right, so kind of on accident, we realized that was totally on accident. We were not doing this on purpose.
Yeah.
We wound up with all of the US World War II subguns. And so we were like, okay, well, let's shoot them all together.
It'd be interesting to do, some sort of a comparison.
Yeah.
And I guess as far as with these sorts of videos, I like it whenever you start with what this video isn't.
Right.
So this video isn't an end-all, be-all, ultra-objective comparison of which of these is actually the best.
That'll come later once the gun computer's finished.
Yeah, we need a gun computer for that.
Yeah.
This video is more along the lines of what was our perception and representation of, a quick little run through of these guns. Of course, we've got individual videos on all of them talking about our feeling of the gun sort of from that more design perspective.
Right.
Instead of a sort of mixture of design, historical, and then a little bit on the shooting side.
Right.
With more of a focus on the design, of course. But we then had all of the guns and figured we'd do some sort of a more objective, but still somewhat subjective look at how they actually go about performing.
What we wanted to do was quantify it.
Right.
Quantify what we're saying, put some numbers to the art.
Right, because comparing these to things outside of what was tested here is difficult. But
Right.
comparing them to each other through the same series of steps, we felt would be at least somewhat interesting and may bring some observations to light that we otherwise wouldn't come to.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest, my perceptions were challenged.
A little bit, yeah.
Mine were challenged a lot because, well, I'm just going to give something away. Before I was messing with any of these, I had like a big attachment to this gun.
And I figured this gun would have done better.
I thought, and I had shot this a lot, and when I shot it compared to the Thompsons I had shot in my head, I was like, this is so much better, it's so underappreciated, this was probably the best US World War II subgun. And then I actually shot it side by side with the others, and I actually started putting objective factors next to it, and I'm like, well, anyway, we'll get to the actual conclusions. I don't think it's the worst, but things really change when you go apples to apples and when you do stuff at the same time. So, we've got all the videos on these individually that you guys can check out, but we were like, how do we compare them? So what we did is we set up a set of factors. I'm gonna hide the final scores. And what we did is a ranked choice voting system because it is possible to do voting that isn't stupid. So we did ranked choice, which is basically for each factor, we put in the list from best to worst of the guns. So those were shooting ergonomics. How does it feel
to actually shoot? How does it feel holding the gun in a shooting stance and shooting the gun?
Right, exactly. So this doesn't involve any operation of any controls aside from the trigger. Then manipulation ergonomics, so actually operating the controls of the gun and doing the finer movements with it.
Yeah.
Sights, pretty straightforward. How usable are they? And then that factors in like whether it can be adjusted if it needs to be adjusted. Shooting comfort. Then the Submachine test, which we've talked about many times. Is all of the mechanical complexity on the gun necessary to achieve a core function of the item? Which is important. Then we had best vibes. And best vibes is different from overall impression, which is the next one. Best vibes is if you have your eyes closed and somebody says, I'm giving you a World War II US submachine gun, which one do you go? I hope it's this one. I hope it's this one. Yeah.
And I felt we should throw that one in there mostly for because there are personal biases, and this one exposes sort of where those biases lie.
Right.
Also, at the end of this test, my answer before this test and after this test for best vibes, completely different.
Completely different. Yeah, entirely different.
Places.
Yeah, like totally fucked up. And so we'll go over those. Then overall impression, which is a mixture of best vibes with the objective criteria.
Right. So all things considered,
Yeah.
which do you think sort of has the most utility? Be that martial or
Right.
on the range, which was sort of more of what we are doing, because martial utility sort of involves some question of put a lot of rounds through at what breaks and all these sorts of things.
Right.
And we did put quite a few rounds through all these guns. I think it was at least 450 rounds today. We really hosed hose some dirt with these things.
Yeah, and that's just in the comparison. That's not including the individual shooting we
Right.
did. So a decent course of fire for an exercise like this. So that's all stuff that you can armchair lawyer and explain away and like game for your favorite gun. So then I was like, well, we have to do some objective test.
Right.
So we came up with the regulation can crush. This challenge is what we've come up with, and it tests the most authentic, correct circumstance, how to do it. So there's soda can over there, and we got 45 gun here. And so what it is on the start signal, which will be the M1 Garand ping, that's how you know your guy needs your support. And so we've got authentic targets. The targets is the sodium can, and the sodium can is the exact size of Japanese head. So we're testing from the start. You got to engage and destroy one regulation Japanese head at 25 yard meters, and this will test each one to see if it's best. All right, shooter is ready. I shot him.
So I've got a different strategy. I talked with my grandpepper on the Iwo Jima, and they said they never used the skites. They said it was a trench broom and they shoot from the hip only. That's not actually what he said at all, but I am interested in seeing there is doctrinal like training use of these subguns that's meant to be hip point shooting. And so I'm going to see if I can hit our regulation Jap head here at 25 yards, hip shooting only. Which probably won't be faster, but it will be more fun. Ready? Yeah!
You did hit him.
Eventually. He was scared the whole time, too.
This one I'm gonna go with. I can't decide if I want to do it semi or full. I feel like full's a better option.
Yeah.
And this is you got to do your game. This is how they did it. So I'm selecting to do full fire on this one. We'll see what happens. Shooter is ready.
He's down.
I got him.
Oh, this is going to be great. All right. I am ready. That is tons easier to do from the hip than the grease gun. And probably just a factor of its better rate of fire.
Yeah. All right, interesting. I honestly feel that doing semi is probably the move here. So we're going to do the same low port. I'm going to fire from semi-automatic mode. And if that doesn't work out, like if it's way off, I'm just going to quickly flip over. But I feel I've got a winning strategy. All right. I'm ready. Fuck me.
There you go.
Here's your greasy reezy.
Greaser riser. Gonna try and grease them, boys. Got the clip. Good. Alright. On full. Oh, this is gonna be tough. I can already tell. This one does not point as nice. All
I mean,
right,
you can adjust your strategy.
But I want to be consistent across all of them.
Okay. You can do whatever you want. It is a competition.
I'm ready.
Disqualified.
The M1 Thompson, I think, is the king of hip fire.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I also peppered my wrist with ejected cases there.
All right. I'm ready.
Rattle them, boys. At 20 in the Trench Hosler, full Scotto with no Skype.
It's a big strat.
All right, I am ready.
Disqualified.
Disqualified.
So what we do is we took the averages of those. So basically our two answers to all of the subjective questions, averaged them together, and then we added the scores. Basically, number one is 1 point. First place is 1 point. Second place is 2 points. Third place, the lowest number is the best score. Added it all together, and came out with the final average scoring. And it's, I guess nothing to do but just kind of show it. There it is. The grease gun, far and away, the best score.
Yep.
But not necessarily in the way you might think. So here's your factors and here's mine. So let's talk about first shooting ergonomics. What did you
I picked the reason for shooting ergonomics mostly just because of the fact that it has a normal stock that sits in a normal place, that goes in your shoulder normally. Specifically for the hip firing that I did in the test, it was probably the worst for hip firing shootability.
Well, you DQ'd so when you did your hip test, 2 of them got 4th place because he spent a whole mag and couldn't hit.
Right.
Right.
And so
that was this one and this one, by the way.
The hip shootability of the Riesling is quite bad, but from the shoulder, it's comfortable. It feels like a normal gun.
Right.
That's
important.
Not necessarily modern, but feels like a normal gun. Your head sits in a regular place for the sights to have a cheek weld.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily like how far the trigger curls up whenever you pull it, because you end up mushing your finger up against the stock thumb. That's probably the one thing I ding it for. But in terms of the actual shooting of the gun, it feels normal.
It also bizarrely has the worst trigger of all the guns, despite being closed bolt trigger fired, which is like, y'all really tried.
It shouldn't be possible.
Yeah, but you succeeded. Especially when the sear surface on it is so small.
Right.
Anyway, so I also had the reason number one for shooting ergos for largely the same idea. When you get down on this gun, it compared to, and this makes the most sense when you compare it to all the regular guns, this is the only one that feels like a regular gun.
Yep.
It just feels like a gun, and that's comforting.
And it doesn't weigh very much.
Doesn't weigh very much, and also, it is the most inline. Well, it and the grease gun are the only ones that are relatively inline of a recoil experience. So it doesn't rise too much. It really kind of stays where you put it. So it was up there for me too in shooting ergos. Number 2 in shooting ergos. What was your number 2?
I gave that to the M3. Just because of the fact that it's not overweight. I had to knock both of the Thompsons for the fact that they just aren't light guns, and your head doesn't want to end up behind the sights. And even though this thing has an awful feeling trigger guard and an awful stock, I felt that it beats out the Thompsons just from a standpoint though. Holding a Thompson feels cool. If whenever you're put to the task of like actually doing some sort of a drill, even if it's something as simple as shoot the can, you sit there and it's like, I feel suddenly inadequate with my ability to shoot this gun because it's very awkward.
Yeah, because I'm like, wait, which is interesting though, given the way some of the scoring worked out, and we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, no, the grease gun is it's the second most gun-like. It's whereas the Thompsons both have like
alien nonsense going on.
Yeah, like bullshit, like tentacle design. The grease gun handles like a gun. The reason I definitely wouldn't consider the grease gun up there is because the way you grip the foregrip is just kind of.
It is kind of awkward.
It's a little fucked up. Like it's a little weird. I would like it if there was a place where you could more horizontally put your hand. And interestingly and doctrinally, it's the only one that doesn't force you to place your hand horizontally.
Yeah.
which is weird, especially when they compared it to the Sten. But I guess they had compared it to the Sten and the MP40, and they were like, the Germans just told them, and it's cheaper. But anyway, so yeah, I also had the grease gun second. So I guess in which way did you put the Thompsons?
M1 then 28, just on a question of weight.
Really, I put 28 then M1. All because of the charging handle.
Of course, that's manipulations ergo though.
Oh wait, no, not the charging handle.
The
Muzzle, the brake, yeah. So, which I think has to factor in.
It is.
It was hard. It was hard because
it is definitely flatter shooting, but the place that my mind went to is assuming you're going to have to carry this thing at any point in time and hefting it up to your shoulder over and over again.
Right.
This gun's like 2 pounds lighter.
Yeah.
Which is not nothing.
No. Well, that makes sense. So what about manipulation ergo?
I don't think any of these guns manipulate well at all. The order that I went in was grease gun 28, M1, rising.
I can't make this up. By the way, we haven't looked at each other's.
Right.
So yeah, grease gun 28, M1 rising, and
I don't think there's much explanation that needs to happen other than this one. Obviously, the 28 obviously better manipulating than the M1 just because of being top cocking.
And the rising is like
rising's awful. Magazine change is slow. The fact that you have to push back and pull down is not human.
Yeah.
The charging handle is rough and
the selector
stiff.
is fucked up.
Selector's not great.
The sights are not like the sights are nominally adjustable, but
it's
not
awful.
really. Yeah.
Right. The manipulation is just everything bad here. And so it's really just a question of what manipulates better, the grease gun or the M3. I'm going to give it to the grease gun because the Thompson has selectors and they're in awful positions that aren't human or good to get to. The grease gun does not have selectors. You don't have to worry about that. It's extending a stock, which manipulates fine, cranking a charging handle, and moving a dust cover.
Right.
All of those are fine.
So I think the grease gun, none of these manipulate well, but the grease gun manipulates way better than the others. And the reason for that is there's really only 2 controls, like really, you can count the stock release or whatever. I'm not counting that, but there's really a trigger and a cranker. This is more of a switch because it's, you could get confused explaining this to somebody, but the simple fact is if the dust cover is closed, the shit's not going to work, and it's going to make you immediately aware it's not going to work. If you try to actuate the cranker, it wants to flip it open, right? It makes you very aware.
It's similar to later down the line, the AK's dust cover, or earlier up the line, the Model 8's dust cover.
Right. And so discounting the dust cover, there's a trigger, which feels very good, and a jerk offer, right? That only does one thing and only moves in one way.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's, compared to something modern, it's kind of fucked up and weird. But then compare that to, that's so funny. Like it's whenever you are employing the dust cover on anything except a closed bolt, it makes you aware that you're doing something weird and it's not going to work. But then compare that to here, which, you've got a charging handle, which is simple on both of these, but look at these controls.
Awful. They're just awful either way.
They're stupid.
I think they're a little bit better on the finer machined ones instead of the peg and posts.
I just think the peg and post is funny. But the mag catch is
awful.
It's not intuitive, right? After you learn it, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. You can get it kind of fast. But explain to somebody to remove the mag, use your thumb and press this up while yanking down. It's stupid.
Yeah, you're pushing up there. That's weird.
And then you've got like 1.5 inches away from each other, 2 little knobbers
that have to go 180 degrees.
Yeah. And it's stupid. It's got way too many controls. They're way too close together. It's not even close, really.
It's not even close, and the winner didn't do well.
Yeah, the winner. So the thing is, he's a mile ahead of everyone else, and he puked. Right.
If we want to extend manipulation ergos, we didn't discuss this before, but if we want to just change manipulation ergos to include takedown, I think I'm about the same answer, except I'll switch the M1 and the 28 just because of the recoil spring in this gun is
like,
a much worse system. But Otherwise, answer stays in the exact same order.
Right, yeah, no, because taking this down, you take off that one massive obvious thing that
And then
comes
you pull
off.
the trigger guard.
Yeah, and then everything pukes out.
And just sort of falls apart.
Yeah, pretty good. And people say that the jerk offer is super delicate. We did have it cause one weird malfunction where it overrode the bolt.
And I think that was because I was holding it where my hand was right here.
You're holding
and
it
whenever the
left-handed.
gun slumped forward, I sure didn't think I touched it, but I
Right.
must have.
Yeah,
I
and
must have just barely bumped it.
that was a left-handed manipulation issue. But then you just cocked it.
I just kept my hand low, and then it worked fine.
Well, but just cocking it solved it.
Yeah.
So that was simple. But yeah, so that's. I think that was an important one, but it's also an obvious one. Sights. This is a hard one because they're.
None of them are great. I went with M50 because its sights feel normal and they're most in line.
So yeah, number one reason, I agree.
I went with the M3 next for more or less the same reason. They're in line and they're just there.
I didn't. So I then went to the M1 because you get more of a sight radius, and the only reason I was going to go with the greaser, but there's a little bit of noise right between this hinge top and the front post, and the front post just looks stupid. I get a little noise there with the hinge, and it can be a little distracting. Whereas this is as simple as it can possibly be. It's a hole in a post. So close, but I had M1 edging above the grease gun in terms of sights, and then the 28 dead last with that stupid.
I put the 28
notch.
over the M1 because I just
Really?
assumed that the notch doesn't exist.
you just have it flipped
But
up.
the notch is like utterly a point shooting sight, and that when folded up, I do like the aperture there, and I like the aperture there better than the aperture here. Just from the standpoint of the aperture there is matted, the aperture here isn't. In certain lighting conditions, you're not going to see that.
Some of these are matted though.
Yeah,
I got a cheap one because the actual.
I don't know if I guess that's a Thompson person question. I don't know if any military ones would have been.
I've seen them. Yeah. So there was the one that, because this gun had a hell of a life, right?
Yeah.
It was an M1, and then the sight that we had with it was just an L.
Yep.
But the L had matting on the back. But I was like, I can't tolerate just the L.
Yeah.
Because
it will
need
get
the
that.
ears. And then, it was the modern one. But I have seen stamped ones that it's just the stamped dealie here that still has a Lyman trademark and a texture on the back. So,
and that's one of those things that for most shooters in most instances you won't even notice it because you've got a red dot on the gun anyway. You'll never use the iron sights, but some amount of matting or patterning on a sight is very important whenever you're shooting in weird lighting conditions, like a target that's very backlit or your sights are backlit and your target isn't, because of the way the human eye works, and it will try and your eye blares one out louder than the other and becomes difficult then to see.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, sights are something that, I guess, as we see from our answers here, are fairly subjective and more subjective than most things.
Right.
Because eventually you're going to run into somebody who likes the sort of V-notch sights and will say that this has usable sights, and it doesn't.
I don't want to hear from them. All right, next up, shooting comfort.
I feel like this one's pretty easy.
It's like
You
had the different thing where you were trying to fight it,
right?
Whereas I know this gun, and I know that what you do is you just point it with both eyes open and pull the trigger.
You can't try and control it because it is so slow. The gun doesn't ever stop moving.
Yeah.
So if you think like, oh, I can feel the bolts back, I'm going to start pulling down.
Yeah.
Shouldn't start pulling down because that bolt's going to go slow and push the gun down on its own.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to overcorrect because you're trying to strangle the gun and hold it tight.
Right.
It's never going to work. It's similar to the G3 or an overgassed AK in that regard, which is funny because
just got to ride it.
This is king smooth, and AKs and G3s aren't exactly king smooth.
Yeah.
But you just sort of have to let them ride because the gun is moving so much.
Yeah, no, this shit is like actually straight comfy, like straight comfy.
You could give this to a child or somebody who's recoil averse, and they could shoot a machine gun and be fine.
Yeah, they'd enjoy it, right? Because it makes the noise and all this stuff. So then after that, here's a shocker.
28.
28.
Yeah.
28, like 100%. But then what'd you put after the 28?
I put the M50 next.
Me too. I actually put the Riesling next too. because
I wonder how much of this has to do with compensators, but this feels uncomfortable.
this feels
You feel the bolt jackhammer the back of the receiver with this thing.
Yeah. And the Riesing has a completely underweight bolt.
Yes.
And
the gun weighs like 5 pounds, a ton less than the M1.
So the Riesing bolt only weighs 400 grams. It's like shockingly light compared to the other ones here. The delay system is fucking fake. It's not as fake as the Blish. It's putting a microscopic amount of delay, 10 pounds.
Except some questionable amount of delay. Like it simulates having a heavier recoil spring for like that much time.
Which
it's not nothing, but it's close.
Yeah, it's real, but come on, right?
Right.
It's like peanut butter territory. But there's just something, and it might be a mixture of it having an relatively inline compared to the Thompsons, but it feels just better.
And maybe of course it doesn't really have that much more travel than the Thompson, but it doesn't feel as jackhammery as the M1.
Well, and then with the striker spring, you wind up with effectively a
it may
buffer.
just be that it buffers a little bit better because of the striker, so it gets that secondary stage.
Yeah, it isn't like, and don't get me wrong, it's not clean, right? It's not a clean feeling gun. It's like when you pull that trigger, it's happening.
It is not smooth.
Yeah, shit's happening when you pull that trigger. But like compared to this one, where it's like, this is you pull the trigger and there's like a series of ratchets that are moving and the gun is firing. There's a gnome with a great hammer just sending each round.
And lest we forget, this gun squirts tear in your face. It's kind of awful, and your shooting glasses get covered in oil.
Yep. All right, so then I feel like this one should be pretty straightforward, but the Sonic Super test.
And for those of you who have somehow, this is your first video, congratulations.
Yeah.
But Sonic Super was an aviator, author, who
and
also
French person
and dabbled in engineering. And he proposed a quote for engineering, which says that the designer knows he has achieved perfection, not when there is nothing left to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. It's a sort of quip that points at does the mechanical complexity that you put into the thing, is that strictly necessary for the thing to fulfill its function? Because the perfect design has only what it needs, as simple as possible, to accomplish the specific thing that it sets out to do. It doesn't try to do everything at once unless that's necessary, and then it accomplishes it in the most simple way possible. Right. So the Draco.
Draco, yeah, this is premium. But I think it's obvious who's number one here. That one. We talked about all of the factors, right? What's next for you?
The M1.
I agree, the M1, because
the M1 simplified a lot of the bullshit that's going on here. I think the funny thing is the M1 just needs a lighter bolt. Yeah. And it doesn't make sense initially.
Well, a lighter bolt and maybe a comp.
Yeah, a lighter bolt and a comp probably gets this to shoot just like this, only it weighs less. Yeah. Significantly less than this.
It has. We got to figure that out. We got to I feel like we got to do one more.
We need to start feeding Thompson bolts to the mill.
If only they weren't fucking $300. But okay, so after the M1, what'd you put? Riesing or 28?
After the M1, I had put the 28.
I put the Riesing. For the simple reason that these both have stupid delay mechanisms. This has a stupid fire control mechanism. Yeah. This doesn't, but it aggressively overcomplicates a simpler fire control mechanism. And so then I said, okay, well, if you're going to have a dipshit mechanical delay, which one is going to edge out? The one that technically does something, or the one that's a lying trick?
Does nothing, right?
Yeah, it's a trick. So that's why I put the Riesing, I had the Riesing third here, because the dumb bullshit that it's doing accomplishes something. Right.
And I had just said it because I sat there and thought Sonic Super usually gets at what the maturity level of a design is, because usually as a design matures, it usually ends up dropping the bullshit that is fake and focuses on the things that are real. And so there's a lot in the Riesing that could be like if you made a Riesing 2. Yeah.
Like that honestly is like retarded.
Like the whole fire control group design needs to go. The delay mechanism could probably be taken out of the gun, massively simplify its manufacture. That receiver shouldn't be a machined tube, it should be a stamped tube. There'd be nothing wrong with doing that.
The one thing you get with the fake delay, though, is a actual competent out of battery safety.
Right.
This is the only gun here that has a competent out of battery safety.
Right. The way the magwell holds onto the gun is
Retarded.
hilarious.
Yeah.
The way the gun disassembles is hilarious. There's just a lot of
nails.
There's a lot. There's nails holding parts of the gun together.
Yeah.
The one thing I'll give it that feels mature is its takedown. Everything else, like the selector, the way the sights adjust, everything else on this gun feels awfully immature. And in fact, between the two that we showcased in that video, they changed a lot of bullshit on this gun. But just between the production run that it had. And I think that's just sort of indicative of it wasn't a very mature design, and you had the gun seen more success or more adoption, and had this
or the multiple millions of government dollars that they threw at Colt to like make it do different.
Had the M1 carbine not happened, had this gun not happened, you may have got a Riesing 2, and that would have sort of incorporated some of these ideas where the fire control group doesn't. In fact, it can probably just be full auto only.
Yeah.
That's sort of something that I appreciate about. With something that's starting to approach the 1,000 round per minute mark, probably anything 800 plus, having select for semi probably helps you because getting off single rounds starts to become a little tricky, especially if your finger's tired. With something like this, there's literally no reason to have select fire because pop.
Yeah, this is so slow that it's actually funny. So you'll see in some of the B-roll, I wanted to get a short burst and then a reload. But I kept doing singles. I kept doing singles because I had come off of these guns. So I was like, pop, 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 pop. And then I reload.
Yeah.
Pop, 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 pop. But yeah, so that's good. So then best vibes. Which gun gives you the biggest vibe? Okay, so here's where we disagree. You really like this thing.
I hate it. I hate that I like it, but
yeah,
it just feels awfully right to shoot.
Well, it's kind of like how our friend Othaius rides scooters. But that's objectively terrible and they don't feel good to ride. But this feels great to shoot despite it being terrible.
Despite it being a scooter.
Yeah. So your best vibes is the 28.
Yeah.
Mine's the greaser.
Okay.
And I don't know, I might have to admit that like there might be a bias because this is mine.
Yeah.
Right? But like I didn't feel that way when I first owned it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I still liked the Riesing better. The Riesing gave me better vibes before we did all this. But it's just
initially the Riesing was my pick for the best vibes. Was like that's just so cool.
Yeah, shit's different, and it is still cool.
Right. Shooting it makes it less cool than I think everything else.
But this thing is just so preposterously controllable and like. And the way you explain best vibes was right. You close your eyes, somebody gives you a subgun.
Like, which one did they just hand you?
Yeah. And it was close because this is objectively wicked cool and way fun.
Yep.
But like,
and it actually shoots good.
Yeah, shockingly. But then I like thought to myself, what if it was like the only gun though that I got to use for like, and I had to actually use it for something?
Right.
I would much rather have the one that weighs like a third and also is wickedly controllable.
Right.
So that's why I edged it there. But right after that, it was the 28, followed by the Riesing, followed by the M1, which was previously my favorite Thompson.
Yep. So I think we just had these two switched.
That's it. So yeah, you were Riesing then that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. So Riesing's still better than this, which blows me away because this is a complete change in my opinion. And then now overall impressions. Mine lines up exactly. Did you flip anything in your overall? No. Okay. So yeah, your overall
impression and best vibes are just duplicative. But
I originally had them had the Riesing flip with the 28 in overall impression.
I almost flipped the Riesing in the M1.
Really?
Because I was the more I shot the Riesing, the more I was like, yeah, this is kind of a dog. It's hard to keep running.
Yeah, I really like the Riesing still.
Also, I like between both Riesings, between all of the mags that we had to test in the Riesings, consistently the second to last round in the magazine wants to do this.
Yeah.
Consistently.
Oh.
50% of the time you get to the second to last round, it like stops you to let you know second to last round.
It was funny because we were like, oh well, it must just be the bad mag, right? And
try the different mag and then try the different gun.
Yeah. We had 3 different mags that we brought out, which you might think good. Try fucking buying Reason mags,
It sucks.
asshole. Yeah. This one didn't come with a mag when I got it, and then I almost cried when I was like, "Oh, what a great deal! I'll just get the mag for it." And turns out I was like, "Oh, okay, I paid more than now then," but whatever. But so yeah, then the interesting thing, in terms of the shooting, so traditional, right? Low ready to up to the shoulder. 28 was fastest. It was pretty close. It was by 1/3 of a second faster than the grease gun. And then the M1 was 2 seconds behind that. And then the Reasing, I was like, no, I'm going to game this. I'm going to do it semi-auto. And then I fucking couldn't get it to connect.
Because it's got an awful trigger.
Yeah. And I also just didn't know where it was holding. So it wasn't good. Then you from the hip came right at it with the M1.
The M1 points really, really well from the hip, and I don't know why the 28 didn't point as well from the hip.
Yeah. So you nailed it right away with the M1, like right away. Like you fired like 8 shots, and the 4th one hit, and then you just kept firing from it. Then the grease gun, you fired like 15 shots, but you made a connection after like 10.
The grease gun was hard because it shoots slow enough that you're waiting for where's my next impact, and you start panicking and you're like
and then the Reasing and the 28, you just dumped the whole fucking mag and couldn't connect.
I think they're fast enough that your brain can't do the okay, I need to correct here before you're out of ammo.
And so then the final score, and I think this bears out. With my new impressions, or both of our new impressions of the guns. So this takes into account how they performed in our shooting tests and our subjective ideas here. Grease gun pulls away 14.5 points, followed by the 1928 at 22.5, followed closely by the Reasing at 25, and then by the same difference, the M1.
Yep.
So there's a big gulf, right? And that kind of tracks, right? This is the best by a lot, and then the rest of these are kind of
I would say, but when you say best, I would caveat that with it's the best all around.
Yes. So
I think that I think if you were to break it down into best and then which one min-maxed the best, so which one has the most number ones, and then
So let's see who has the most number ones. On mine,
for me, it's still the M3, but
yeah, mine too. Well, except actually the 28 didn't get any number ones. That's interesting. I didn't select the 28 for anything, but it still came out very, very close. So for me, my personal only my interest was Grease Gun 10 points, Reasing 18 points, 28 19, and M1 23. Yours was what?
11 for the Grease Gun, 16 for the 28, 16 for the Reasing, 24 for the M1.
So that's pretty damn similar. But yeah, in terms of... So you think this one min-max is the hardest?
I think this one min-max is the hardest from a standpoint of it's a heavy dog. It shoots too fast to make it good at the shoot. It's a particular shooting test we picked. It shoots just a little bit too fast.
Well, from my shoulder,
also
it zapped it.
Whenever I retried it from the shoulder, it was for me too.
Yeah, we did. We let him retry it, but I was like, no, we have to be objective about these.
Because that way we have one from the shoulder, one set of data from the shoulder, one from shoot.
But we both just zapped that motherfucker from the shoulder.
I think this min-maxes in some regards. Also, it has the best worst mechanism.
Yeah. No, it has so it is kind of cool to have the one. Right? Do you want the one that's real asterisk but sucks? It's got a real delay mechanism.
Or the one that's fake but then somehow actually shoots good.
Yeah, or the one that just straight doesn't fucking do anything. It's fake. It's a little note here is that somebody on Wikipedia, and this is another reason you can't trust them fuckers, very clearly spent way too much money on a transferable M50 because he wrote this like screen about how the delay mechanism obviously works. Like it obviously does something because the bolt is half of the weight of the Thompson. It's like, yeah, and that bitch is screaming.
Yeah.
Like it's fucking screeching.
And I mean, just the difference in the spring weight you can feel is pretty substantial.
And that you then have to feel with that one weird muscle going all the way up your arm. But I did think that was so... Of course it's delayed. The bolt is so light. Guess what? It's called, you have an underweight bolt.
And you push a rod down the barrel.
Yeah, you push a rod down the barrel and it...
Just unlocks. Just whatever it is.
Well, because it never locked. The thing is, I don't call that a lock. A lock has to lock. Like, you know, physically be joined together. Whereas this has a slight angle on a slight angle. And so what happens when you push on it a little bit?
You just have to sort of like push a operating rod out of the way.
Yeah.
That's the spring.
It's fake.
About 10 pounds of force.
Yeah, okay, yeah, it's not fake. It's bullshit.
Right.
But I did just love that. It must, because it's so much lighter. But it's like, well, on a blowback gun, guess what?
You can have an underweight bolt. Congratulations.
The Walther PPK has the same weight slide when it's a 32 and when it's a 380.
Well, actually, even lighter slide when it's a 380 because the barrel diameter is bigger.
Yeah. Do you think they like added a delay? No, that bitch is just screaming when it's shooting a 380. The slide is just screaming, and it can handle it because the frame is made of steel. And then you see that on the derivative guns where the slides are aluminum, like the Polish ones. Guess what happens to where the frames are aluminum? Guess what happens to them?
The 380s crack.
They fucking break. But anyway, yes, it's all that aside. I had a lot of fun with this project.
It's pretty cool
for sure, and originally this was going to be a flip, but I think I'm keeping this. I really like this gun.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's just this and the Sterling are probably the only machine guns where I'm like, I feel confident that you could just hand this to anyone and be like, here, shoot your first machine gun, and they'd 100% have a nice time
and not be at serious risk of hurting themselves or other people.
Yeah, exactly. And it do just have a certain vibe on it. Yeah. I love the Kickstarter because I love the AK charge.
I think the Kickstarter's better. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I never called it that. I called it the bell crank.
Yeah.
Until
the hog cranker.
Yeah, the hog cranker. But until we hung out with Uli when we were hanging out at Royal Tiger, and he just kept saying Kickstarter. And I'm like, yeah, sure.
Is it sort of shaped like that?
Yeah, is it? But I mean, whatever. Kickstarter. But then it caught on. Now I'm calling it a Kickstarter. But yeah, so let us know whatever you think, and also how you missed obviously the Hyde submachine gun, because that would have been
that was a real one. Yeah.
It was so real that they issued them. But yeah. Anyway, guys, thanks for whatever it is you do around here.